were the biggest challenges you faced when you began the company, and what are they now?
I think our challenges were the same challenges that every small business has, and I can list those endlessly, but that is giving birth to any notion and putting it into action and getting people to pay for whatever you're doing, and those are the sort of the nuts and bolts of starting any business. I think our biggest issue at the time was that we were trying to launch something that no one really understood. And people really didn't understand what craft beer was when we started the brewery. I mean, I'd go to beer events and people would say, "Oh, that's that dark beer," or I just drink light beers. You got any light beers? And then they just saw beer in terms of color. I often said that the big brewers had basically programmed the world, frankly, to basically distill down beer to this notion of refreshment and good times. I mean, that's all they wanted you to focus on. And when there's so much more, there was ingredients, there was tradition, there was process, there was styles, there was history, and that was all the stuff that we were wrapped up in. And eventually, people got into it. So that was our biggest issue, was actually trying to talk about beer to people who really weren't that interested. I'll give you a great story, and I think I told it a million times. The very first account we had was a small tavern about three miles away from our brewery. It was the very first account that we took beer to, and they had 4 tap handles there: Bud Light, Coors, and Foster's. And the big domestic beers were just, you couldn't move them. It was like suggesting that you shouldn't have a Ford dealership in your town. And so I went off to the Foster's, and the barman at the time said, "What are you talking about? This is a really interesting beer. It's from Australia, and why would I, give up this beer for yours?" And I had to educate the guys that, this beer, although it was started in Australia, it was actually started by a couple of Americans in the mid-1800s. They sold it 15, 20 years later. It's been owned by 8 different breweries since then. And that the beer that you're drinking right there was brewed in Canada by a Chinese-owned conglomerate. and so, and here I am. We're brewing beer 3 miles away from you, and you're not interested. Today, they wouldn't let me out of the building. It's, in a farm-to-table world, it's like, we rule the roost. We find it difficult being relevant in Santa Barbara now, because we're making the beer in Paso Robles. Restaurants are saying, "Well, nice little we were working in a culture that was just very, very, very dry. So that was our biggest issue.
What is your biggest challenge now?
Well, so we got the standard challenges that you guys are all aware of as brewers, as business owners. First of all, ignorance. I said we have 500 people. We employ actually 650 people.
And he just told me that stat
I know.
like 3 weeks ago.
So, just trying to keep up with a growing business is difficult. And all of the things associated with it: capital, people, regulation, customers, culture, all of that stuff. So all of that is a huge dominating factor, and I find myself, as is my partner, more and more involved with those sort of holistic things. Less so with trying to persuade tavern owners to give me the Foster's handle. Today because we've changed, because we're actually now seen as a large brewer, we have different competitors. And so now we're going toe-to-toe with the big brewers. And prior to that point, we really weren't. They really weren't that interested in us. We never really threatened them. And in fact, most of the time we don't threaten them. This brand 805, for some reason, the beer gods blessed us with the 805, and it's been sort of adopted by the consumer who really isn't that engaged with craft beer. It's just sort of like, it's cool beer, I like it, it tastes good, it's got sort of an interesting story, I want it. And they developed an emotional connection to it. So that beer actually hunts like a big brewer's beer hunts. And so all of a sudden it's like, hang on a second, you're on our patch. So we don't like that. We have strong competition now. And so So that is a huge challenge, is actually being able to sort of conduct ourselves as who we are in our hearts, which is a small craft brewer in Paso Robles, family-owned business, and then at the other side of things is trying to behave like a big business. I mean, not a big business, but a business that does things